back to the Unfiltered Podcast. We're here again, another episode with the
Another
lovely ladies.
episode.
I realized in a lot of the episodes I call us the lovely ladies, but we've never taken on that name, so I don't know where I got that from, but here we are.
And the fact that we actually are.
Oh, we are very lovely ladies. It's true.
Very much.
You're not wrong.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we have another episode today in our Bible series that we don't have a name for.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Bible series. I think it's fitting.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah.
In case you missed the last episode, we were talking. Probably you can't hear that, but our coffee machine just went off. But he wanted to add in to what we were talking about. Our coffee machine is named Charlie, and he has a mind of his own.
Literally.
Anyways, yes. In case you didn't watch the last episode, we were talking about Moses. I was going to say what's his name, but that didn't feel very respectful.
No.
We were talking about Moses. And in this series, I think Julie said it well in the last episode in her little intro that we are not scholars nor professionals, nor do we know everything about the Bible and all the ins and outs of Jewish law or Israelite, I don't know, practices or something. We are not professionals here. And we are not pretending to be, so that's good. But just for kind of a disclaimer, if you will, that we are not sitting here pretending that we know everything or that we have all the right answers or, I don't know, we've read the Bible in and out every time so we can teach you something. That's not the goal at all, by any means. We're here to kind of just discuss it. And I think in the last episode, something that really not surprised me, but I feel like all of us were oh my gosh, Moses and this and that, and we got really into it, and I think the Bible is actually so interesting, and obviously can teach us so much, hence why we have it, and it's something that's actually really precious. So I think it's good that we're doing this series and that we can kind of just dive deeper into it a little bit. Also for us personally, in the last episode, I feel like I was everything. I was ooh. Yeah, this is for me, not for anybody else. You know what I mean? I think that's talking about me. So that's kind of the idea, is just for us to discuss it and kind of chat about it, go a little bit deeper, and maybe see things from a different perspective. Because a lot of the people in the Bible we hear about a lot in Sunday school or in church or in whatever. We grow up with them and we hear about them. But, there's a lot of things that we also maybe don't know, or little things that seep through the cracks, if you will, that you don't hear about,
that we keep finding out.
Yeah, exactly. So today's episode is on someone a little bit different, but actually someone that I find so interesting. And his name was King Saul. Not Saul.
We're not talking about
Saul Paul.
David.
Yeah, I know. What? I know. So controversial.
So controversial.
No, when we were planning it, we were kind of should we talk about David? Great character, amazing person, and
little guy.
We will probably talk about him in the future.
Maybe at some point. And probably in this episode he'll obviously Saul's and David's stories are very intertwined. Yeah. And kind of come in and out of each other, and they kind of needed each other in a way. But today we're going to be highlighting Saul more than David a little bit, or at least diving a little bit deeper into what was going on there, because there's a lot going on with Saul. And I kind of mentioned to the girls before we started, but I was saying how it's for me, Saul, there's a lot that happened actually before David even showed up on the scene, which maybe in case you've studied Saul, you're yeah, duh. But for maybe for some people, and for me included, to be honest, the first time I read more about Saul was last year, when I really was reading a bit more of the Old Testament, and God was speaking to me a lot through Saul, especially in the time before David showed up. Because once David comes, it's Saul really goes downhill. He takes a tumble, a hard one. A little bit before David, and then David comes, and it's now he's got tormenting spirits, and he's I need a harp because I'm got demons, David, play me some music because this is not a good time, Yeah. It's when you're having a bad moment, you're worship music. Yeah. It's I needed the harp. No, but a lot happens with Saul actually before David even shows up, and I was thinking of it because we were talking about Moses in the last episode and how Moses had like a lot of we said red flags. There was a lot of things about him that were like, what's going on here, you know?
Yeah.
But actually Saul has a lot of those too, but both of those people took very different directions of where they went and where they ended, especially.
But see, Saul had a lot of red flags after. I feel like it's kind of like the opposite in a sense. I feel like, well, I don't know. Well, I guess we'll go deeper into it. But Moses had a lot of red flags, like to the people's standards.
Right.
But I think Saul had a lot of red flags later on, but actually had a lot of green flags to the people's standards because he was the first king of Israel, like the first king that was ever anointed as a king. Yeah. And that was because everybody saw all his good qualities. So actually he had flying colors, you know, in a sense.
And also they were just like, we want a king. Like pretty much like they had Samuel who was doing everything for them. Yeah. Samuel also really interesting person. But he was like kind of leading them, their relationship with God, like their connection with God, you know. Yeah. And then they're all like, we want a king. Yeah. And Samuel's like, he goes to God and he's like, like what? Like I like what's going on? And he, like I don't know where it is in the Bible, but God literally says to Samuel, like, actually, they're not rejecting you; they're rejecting me. They just want a king, and they don't really want me. So actually, Samuel comes along in like kind of a really bad way. Like it's like not really good from the start. Yeah, you know. Saul. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
No,
I mixed up the Samuel and Saul thing.
Yeah. No, it's true. No, it's true. I think his appointing there was definitely not from a good place. But again, in people's eyes and standards, he was good looking. Yeah. The Bible talks about him being good looking.
Head above the rest.
He was rich. He was wasn't he like the leader of the army or like just a good soldier? What was it?
He was an army leader.
Yeah. And he was like really great apparently. Like again, fact checking Maddie.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that because also when he gets anointed, like he or like when Samuel chooses him and is like, you're going to be the next king, he's like, but I come from a bad family. I'm pretty sure he says something like that. So I'm not sure about him being like wealthy or well off.
It says that there was a wealthy, influential man named Kish from the tribe of Benjamin. He was the son of blah, blah, blah. His son was Saul. So Saul's father was wealthy and influential, but Saul wasn't. And he wasn't the commander of the army at this point.
Right.
He meets Samuel because they lose their donkeys and they send him out to go find the donkeys. And then they get lost and they're like, which way should we go? I heard there's a prophet here. Maybe he can tell us which way to go. Yeah. And then he gets anointed king.
Yeah. And then at the same time, God's like, Samuel, I'm sending you someone who's going to be the king. And then he comes and Samuel's like, oh, great. You're the guy. Yeah. And he's like, I'm what guy? I didn't know about this.
That's crazy. Yeah. That's crazy that also he gets anointed as the first king of Israel. Yeah. Being no real guy. Like, with no real like godly qualities, I suppose, you know, but he's still like anointed and like anointed by Saul, who is also like
Samuel.
Sorry. Yeah. It is confusing. Yeah. Well done. Yeah. No, he's anointed by Samuel, who is walking with God and like, you know, like, and he's a prophet. Like, so in many ways as well, like God's grace and mercy being shown in spite of what was there. Like people wanted that, and God also like giving the people what they want even though they don't deserve it. But God.
Yeah. And then Saul's reaction also to being chosen is like a bit interesting because he like Samuel kind of anoints him as king or like chooses him or tells him that he's going to be king. I think he might anoint him. Yeah. Okay. Then he goes back to wherever he was and then they like cast lots or something, and so then like it comes down, he's like, this tribe to this person. Samuel's like, this whole time he's like, I know it's Saul, like beat this up, you know. But everyone's like, no, let's cast lots. So then they're like, oh, okay, so it's gonna be Samuel or it's gonna be Saul. It's gonna be really annoying. And they're like, where's Saul? Where is he?
Yeah.
And he's hiding. He's like, he hid himself, which is so weird. I don't know why, or like why you guys think, or where that came from, you know? Because if he was like tall in stature, like father was wealthy, you know, at least like had some kind of, you know, I think, What do you guys think there?
Also, like, I think it says for something that I read, like, that he also hid it from his family, you know? Like, he knew he was going to be a king, and then he went and hid, as you were saying. He didn't even tell his family, you know? Like, with something like that, I think you, like, want to share it or something. I think it's, like, an interesting reaction because I made a mistake. I don't really know much about him, but how will you react to knowing that you want to do something, now you're a prophet, and not a prophet, now you're like being a king, like what reaction, like how do you react? It's the same, like I really wouldn't know how to react to that.
But I guess because he was the first king, the only other reference of a king was Pharaoh. No? Like, obviously not their reference, because at this point it's been probably like 800 years or whatever. God knows how long. But like up until this point, the people of Israel did not have a king.
Right.
So the last reflection of a king must have been Pharaoh. So maybe there was also something negative when it came to that as well. Like, which is
for him in his perspective.
Which is probably what made him, I don't know, this is my assumption. Like, maybe there's something about the fact that he was going to be anointed king that perhaps was also something that was not welcomed in his family. I don't know. Like, maybe also part of the story of where they came from. Maybe it meant that they would also lose their riches, or I don't know. It brought shame to the family. I don't know. It's weird, but like, I guess up until that point, there was no reference of what that meant. I think today, if somebody was to say, Maddie, Abby, Flo, I'm going to anoint you as a queen, you'll be like, I mean, there's probably like an aspect of like, the responsibility. Yeah. But all we look at is like the perks of like what our reference is to royalty. But I don't think he had that. So maybe.
Yeah, it's true. It's like a clean slate he was starting with. Like he had no point of reference for what that would really look like.
And I guess like the fear or like him hiding, maybe in a way is also probably similar to what Moses did as well. Like Moses ran away into the desert for 40 years, and like he kind of like avoided anything, like he knew that he was saved, you know, like God had a plan, but it was about 40 years in developing that as well. So sure, he ended up taking it into a completely different dimension, but Saul also, like, I'm sure that that's also scary to come to terms with. Yeah.
I have two thoughts that come to mind. And the first one is, if somebody came and said, Maddie, you're going to be queen, I'd be like, who are you?
That's also
to be
true.
honest. Like, I'd be like, okay. I've received a lot of like funky prophecies over my life, you know, of like random people saying something and you're like, yeah, sure. I mean, I've been told by, we'll leave it there. I've been told by a lot of people, like, God told me you're my wife, and I'm single, for those who are following. So you can imagine, you know? So if, all I'm saying is, like, when people come and say, God's doing this, or...
I was finding my glass of water.
That's like a joke you really like usually.
I know, but I was like, wow, I'm impressed.
All I'm trying to say is I think people can come with prophecy, and in case also you don't have that experience also with prophecy, like we were talking about with Moses, you don't have the experience of prophecy, you don't have the experience of hearing God's voice. Saul also didn't have his own revelation of God. He didn't have his own encounter with God. He just has this guy who he met, who took him to dinner, and then one morning wakes him up and throws oil on him and is like, you're the king. It'd be like, who are you? Yeah. You know, like it would be hard for me to trust. Yeah, for honestly. Sure. So that's the first thing that came to my mind. And the second thing is there was like an interesting point in between when Samuel.
Yeah. It really gets you. You're like, how am I mixing this up? And then it just is so immediate. Yeah.
When Samuel anoints him to when Samuel casts the lots, is that Saul gets filled up with the Spirit and he starts like prophesying and like dancing and all this stuff. And people are like, who's this guy? And since when is Saul a prophet? Like he isn't from a prophet's family. He's from this other family, which also shows that like for them culturally, like the gifts of the Spirit move according to the family. Right. You know what I mean? Like the prophet gives birth to a prophet or whatever, you know? So I think there's a lot of elements maybe of lack of trust, but also of like I said, he didn't necessarily have his own encounter with God.
Yeah.
Nor did he have his character like refined in the way that Moses did in order to like uphold the calling that he was getting thrown into. I don't know, if somebody made me queen right now, I think I'd run this country into the ground.
Yeah.
Because I've got no clue what I'm doing.
And like, how old was he?
Don't know.
He was 30 when he became king.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Like,
so he's your age.
He's my age.
Yeah.
You are king.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Like, you're anointed king or queen at the age of 30. You have
with no training.
No training. You
and
know?
also, if he's from a wealthy and influential family, maybe he's never worked.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any concept of working his own hands. He doesn't have any concept of like...
If he was in some sort of like degree in the army or whatever, then for sure. Like,
but he wasn't.
I thought he was in the army though. I thought he was in a general. Oh,
yeah,
that was
but
after.
not yet. Yeah, not yet.
Okay, so that comes after. So
as far as I read, I can do my own fact checking.
Okay, so yeah, up until this point, there's nothing that he has, and so of course I'd be afraid if I've got nothing, if I'm like no title, no anything, and now I'm supposed to be leading these people. And not only is he supposed to be leading the people, but it's also the point is for him to also unite the tribes. No, the point of him being king is also to bring the tribes together. No,
yeah.
But like, who is he?
Some way,
yeah. So like, if I don't know where I come from, if I don't know, like, also like, and I'm 30, like, and you look at all the people that come before you, and you're like, I'm sure that I would also hide. I'd be like, if I'm not here, then maybe they'll choose somebody else.
Yeah,
that's a bit more fitting.
Yeah. Also, it says then Samuel told the people what the rights and duties of a king were. So, like you said before, they didn't even know what a king did.
Oh yeah, and he like rips them to shreds. He's like, this king is gonna screw you over pretty much.
Really?
Not really, but like he kind of is like, he's gonna take your daughters and make them make candles or something. I don't know. I don't remember what he exactly says, but he like tells them a whole list of things that the king is gonna do and how they're not gonna like it. And then at the very end, they're like, we still want one. Literally.
Wow.
Also now as a king you have to make decisions, you know, and like as we said, like, what is your reaction? Maybe like before my decisions were my own, it's affecting me and maybe a few people around me. Now he's making a decision for a whole country, like
as a 30-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. Like, of course, maybe you're a parent, you have your kids, you're like deciding among your family, you know, you're making those decisions. Now you're guiding a whole nation, and like, of course you won't please everyone because you can, but everything for the greater good. But what is the greater good in that time, you know? And like, how do you move with no prospect of anything? Like, as you were saying, there was not kings before that. There was no one to tell you how to do things. Maybe they're like, okay, you're a king, these are your responsibilities. Yeah. But it's beyond your responsibilities, you know, like.
Yeah. But that's a really good point, to be honest, because I think Saul really struggled with people pleasing.
Yeah.
Like a lot of his stories are actually like like a lot of his problems come from like doing what the people say or like worrying about what people will say or like wanting to please the people, you know, or like do what in his mind is the right thing when in reality it's like, but God told you this. Like so many times like Samuel goes to him and is like, but God didn't say that. And he's like, yeah, I know, but like I just thought, like it happens with the burnt offering. It happens with the burnt offering. One time like Samuel's like, oh, we're gonna take up a burnt offering, like wait for me. And then he's like, you just took a long time to get here, so I just did it by myself.
But I think also that like that goes to show as well the responsibility, because okay, sure, maybe Samuel, I said it right, Samuel was the prophet, the one who was listening to God or whatever, but the people also play a part. Even though they're not the king, they're not the queen, they're not anything important, they also like project what they want, and they are the ones who pray, or they like also like spiritually also provoke something to happen, you know. And I think they like this people pleasing for sure. I'm sure that Saul was to like it was also in him. But if the people that you're leading are also asking for something, and the people pleasing is also what you struggle with, then you're also going to want to give them that. There is an aspect of fear of the Lord that you definitely need to have for sure. But at the same time, and I think this is also always a great reminder, I was really reminded about this not so long ago when Paula was here, that like how are we covering our leaders? How are we like looking after them? You know, I think in many ways the only person that was looking after Saul was Samuel, you know, but everybody else was like, and you can see that because literally the reason why Saul is appointed to be king is because of the fact that people just wanted a king.
Yeah.
So in many ways, yes, there is an authority and responsibility that he needs to uphold, but at the same time there's a responsibility from the people of what they are also pouring into him, and he's only feeding into that. Yes, he needs to feed into something else, but at the same time, like so like no, I got it wrong. Samuel comes along and he's like, you shouldn't be doing this is not what God said. But it's you against 1,000, you know, or more, and different tribes as well, who are all pointing towards one direction. So I don't know, like I think it's a point to like look at that. Sometimes we blame the leaders, we blame Saul, we see his flaws, his mistakes, but actually
they're like made worse actually by the thousands of people behind him that are like, do what we say. You know, we put you there so we would get what we want, you know. So true.
Wow.
Yeah, and Saul he does this a couple times. A couple times where he, like, really where I see, like, actually his, like, he has a downfall in a way, like, when David gets there, like, when David arrives on the scene, or whatever you want to say. That's when he, like, gets bad. But I think actually a lot of this stuff, like, or, like, where his, I don't want to say faults, but like where he falls really is actually before David gets there. It's like in these moments where like there's quite a few times, even with the honey, you know, like with Jonathan, his son, and he's like, if anyone eats honey, no one is allowed to eat anything because we will conquer these people on our own. And then Jonathan doesn't know that. So he doesn't communicate that to anyone. He just like shouts it, I guess, to people. And then Jonathan doesn't know. So they're in the like wilderness and they have the honey. And he's like, oh, this is great. I was so hungry. and then they get back. And I think also like something like he doesn't know about it. Like Saul doesn't know. And so I think they cast lots again or something and are like who did it, who sinned. Oh yeah, because Saul is like trying to speak to God, but God's not speaking to him, which like then he's like blaming the whole like eating situation, but I think there was something else going on, you know what I mean? But yeah, and so then he's like, oh, there must be something wrong, and they figure out that it's because of this, like someone ate food, and then they found out that it was Jonathan. And then again the people come in, but at this point now they're like, this part actually is really interesting to me. I don't know what you guys think about it, because and we kind of touched on it last episode where like Moses like almost stands in the gap between like God and the people. Like God is like angry at them, you know, and Moses like pleads with God not to kill the people, you know. And in kind of a similar way, like here we see Saul like wanting to kill Jonathan. He's like, as sure as I have vowed this, so either Jonathan dies or I die, someone's got to die, you know. And he like goes really like extreme,
very dark.
Also, and then the people come in and they're like, no, like don't kill Jonathan, like he saved us, like he won this fight or this battle. And then they're just kind of like, okay. Like I don't know, what do you guys think about that, or like those situations where there's like a mediator, but like I don't know, especially in that instance with like Moses and the people, and it happens again as well, like with someone else, Abraham. Someone else is like with the land that's like full of evil people. What is that one? What? It's a story earlier in the Bible where like there's, I think it's like what's the whole like Gomorrah. No,
Sodom and Gomorrah?
Yeah.
We're trying to track with you, but
you know what I'm talking about though, where like there's someone who's still good. It's like classic Bible story where there's one person who's good, and like God's like, no, he's like, oh, even if there's one good person, you can like save them. Who is that?
Yeah, it is Sodom and Gomorrah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And he says, like, if
Yeah.
there's even one good person in this land, or then he says, if there's 20 or something. And they're
Yeah.
like, and what if there's only 10? And he
yeah.
says, if there's 10, yes. And they said, but what if
Exactly.
there's only one? He says, if there was even one, I would save it. But there wasn't even one. So he didn't even save it.
Yeah, exactly.
And Sodom and Gomorrah still doesn't exist, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
It's like gone.
Really?
Yeah, like it's a salt field.
Oh. Whoa. So they cannot build on top of it.
Sorry?
Like they cannot build like a.
No, I think it's like near the Dead Sea. It's like part of the Dead Sea, which is full of salt and can't have any life in it because it's salty. Yeah. So when
if
God
you're
said,
salty-
I think not, he really meant it, you know? Oh, sorry.
I was putting the salt.
Yeah, what do you guys think about those kind of instances where there's like a mediator between God being like, I want to kill you, and the person being like,
I think, okay, this is not so theological. Don't fight me. But this is what comes to my mind because I also love God and I love his character. And I think sometimes God is also maybe putting us to the test to see how much we fight for each other because I think God loves that. I think God really loves when, like, if one of his commandments is like love your neighbor as much as yourself, like I think maybe there's times that he loves when we fight for each other, you know? And so when God's like, wipe him out, he has all the authority to do that. He's so holy. He's so just. Like, we suck as humanity. So I think he's not wrong in doing that. But I also wonder, I guess, if like there's moments that he's wanting to see who else will fight, like for his people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a stretch, but
No.
not that he pits people against each other or whatever, but maybe it's like, yeah, God within all of his authority to do that. And for one of his kids to say, please, Lord, like, spare them. Like, give them one more chance. Like, give them one more chance. He's like, I love that. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what comes to my mind.
In one sense, it's testing the heart of the people. In this case, like, he's testing the heart of Saul, you know, to see how he's going to lead as king. But, like, even, like, in reference to what you were saying, like, I think back to, well, I think forward, not back in this case, but I think forward from the story to Jesus when he's, like, talking about, like, can't remember exactly how it says, but, like, you know, like, when he's the one who's saying, like, but, like, the food, what is it? Like, the food is only for those who sit at the table. And then the woman says, like, but even, like, the dogs eat from the crumbs, you know?
Yeah.
Like, but in what Jesus is saying, like, it sounds like he's actually saying, like, he's actually going against what the woman's desires are, you know? But I think in all of that, it was also to, like, test to see if any of the disciples would also, like, recognize and see her hunger, you know, to the point that, you know, I think Jesus does that a lot of the times, and I think it's the same character because, again, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is just the same God. Is still the same character of saying, okay, well, I'm gonna do this, and maybe it sounds awful, or maybe it sounds wrong, or whatever. But to see actually, like, who will see God's character behind everything and also fight for God's character, or also, like, just stay with that. I think especially in the Old Testament, many things that happened were because, like, it sounds like God was evil. And yeah, there was some parts where, like, God needed to, like, cleanse fully. But many of the things that happened were also because people were just, like, very passive and very much, like, stayed with, like, that, you know, or like what you were saying, that reaction of, like, okay, whatever, you know, and, like, weren't actually fighting for something. I think in all of this, like, for sure, it was about, like chasing Saul's heart and giving him chance after chance after chance so that he could change. I think God had so much faith and hope in Saul, and that's why he was anointed as king, but also why he was left there for quite a long time as well, before even David came, and even while David came as well, because it took a while until David actually became king. You know, Saul was still there in that role. So I think also God gave Saul so many different chances for him to make it right by God, you know, because even, like, we were talking before with Moses, like, there were many moments as well where God was like, this is what's going to happen, and Moses, out of his love, we were saying last time, out of his love, because he understood the love, he was like, but God, like, have mercy, God have mercy. And we see that Saul many times had the opportunity to have the same reaction and say, God have mercy, and love his people the same way God does. But many times he was just like, yes, God, strike on them, you know? And I think actually what's at play here, and like what really is testing his heart, is if he is submitting his role under God's role of still being the sovereign Lord and God, or if he's taken his role as his own. And I think that was Saul's issue, is that he took his role as his own, and it was like God anointed him, but now it's his role. And
it's
so
like
he's
all his own strength,
basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also he was never left alone, you know, like he always had people around him, like Samuel, that he kept like keeping him accountable for things, you know, like, hey, God is speaking this, and like he kept like as a king, and as you were saying, God gave him so many chances. That's why he was in the as a king for like 42 years or like something like that.
Yeah,
he was there for so long because like not just because God gave him opportunities, and also like as you were saying, like he didn't submit himself, or like God gave him that opportunity, but also like he was also never accountable, or like maybe he never like admitted that he was wrong as well, like that he needed help, or that he needed like guidance, or that he needed to have a breakthrough. And he's like, maybe that's not a word that they had in that time, but that he needed something like a change for him to be that king that people needed to be, or like what they were asking in that time. I think he never was like able to ask for help, or I don't know, ask for help, but like to follow the advice, you know. Like Samuel was there before him, not as a king, but like whatever the story was with Samuel before, but like I think that wanting to be alone and making his own decisions and not waiting on God grew that resentment and that bitterness in his heart before even David came. You know, there was something already in his mind, like little by little, and that's how we see the enemy works, you know, like with that mind, it started like getting worse and worse, and like when you make your decisions, you start like putting God's voice behind. It's like hidden every time and more. And that's why at some point he wasn't talking. Like God was like, you're not, like I am talking, but you're not listening because there's so much between us, you know, like I pointed you, but like you're not listening. Like that gentleness from God as well. Like, like, I don't know. It's like crazy for me. Like, he had all the opportunities to like do it again well, and like so many opportunities, and he just was, let's do my own.
Yeah, I think also something that you said that's really like that was really key or important is like how much Saul really relied on Samuel for a lot, you know, even to the point where like I don't know if you guys know about this story, like later on after David comes around and then Saul is really not doing well, he goes to like a medium and it's like, hey, and like kind of tries to go undercover, and then she's eventually like, I think you're Saul, like what are you doing here? And he's like, I want to conjure up Samuel. He literally like gets a medium to freaking bring Samuel back from the dead and like speaks with Samuel. Like what? Like he like was so reliant on Samuel and like his connection with God and what like Samuel was speaking, and because Samuel was always bringing him back to like trying to bring him back to alignment, you know. And Samuel was the one that anointed him. Samuel was the one that did this, told him what to do, like step by step, you know. And Saul still didn't do it, disclaimer. But at least he told him, you know, at least he had direction, you know. So once Samuel was gone, it was like everything fell apart, you know, to the point where he literally went and like tried to contact. I'm pretty sure Samuel like actually speaks to him. I don't remember where that is.
I'm looking. I'm almost there.
And is like, I don't know what you're doing. Like, please leave me alone or something. Like, I don't think he like talks for very long or like has a long interaction. But it is really interesting how Saul really relied on Samuel. And it's like, part of me, in one way, it's like you can see the goodness in that in one way, you know, like even I think of like, you know, leaning on leadership now, you know, like, you know, people who hear from God and they speak into your life, and that's something that's really beautiful and powerful, and I'm not trying to take that away in any way. But it's true that sometimes we get so reliant on those people who hear clearly that we forget that we can also hear clearly as well, you know. Of course at this time it was a bit different, like we were talking about in the last episode, that like pre-Jesus like Holy Spirit not being here yet, you know, like there's other things, but if we try to apply this now to our lives, it's like, oh, okay, well,
but he was still missing the point.
That's
it.
for sure.
And also, like, even today, like, we can also look at the, like, our leaders, and some, like what you were saying, it's so good to, like, trust and to go and to seek, but where is my faith founded, and who am I actually following? At the end of the day, I need to make sure that I'm not making idols, you know. And I think that was also Saul's problem, is that he made idols out of so many different things. He made an idol of himself as well. And he would only, like, and even what he went to about Saul, when he went to Samuel and what he would go to him about many times, like, it was also based on, like, just what he wanted. And when he wanted it, when Samuel was coming to him to rebuke him, he was like, you know, he wasn't really taking it, you know. So I think in one sense, like, for us today, like, many times we go to our leaders and we're so, like, holding on to our leaders as only about our leaders, but at the same time we're only listening and we're only going to what we want to, but we're not really taking what we should take. But beyond that as well, like, we're only holding on to them as the channel of God. And it's true, there is an aspect where, like, I follow, like, if I'm following behind Flo's footsteps, there is an aspect of also me receiving their dust from, like, as they're walking. But I also need to be able to build my own relationship. You know, discipleship, for example, is always supposed to lead us back to God,
which is
and
what
Samuel
Saul didn't do.
Samuel
really
was
didn't.
leading him to God, but Saul was not connecting with God. Saul was completely shutting God away. He was only able to hear God through Samuel, and that's an idol. That's not a relationship.
For sure.
Did you find it?
Yeah, I found it. It's in 1 Samuel 28. He
What
does.
does
He speaks
Samuel
to
say?
Samuel. Samuel's really pissed off.
Yeah.
He says,
why did you do this?
Yeah, he said, why have you disturbed me by calling me back? And Saul's like, I'm in trouble. The Philistines are at war with me. God has left me and won't reply to by prophets or dreams, so I've called you to tell me what to do. Samuel says, why ask me, since the Lord has left you and become your enemy? Strong. Yeah. And then Saul falls on the ground and doesn't eat. He's like paralyzed.
Yeah.
He's a little drama queen. I mean, I'd do the same, but let's
dramatic.
He wasn't blind.
Okay, I don't know if what I'm going to say is, like, it can be controversial. I don't know. But I don't know. Something that strikes me about Saul is that he's not very grounded in his relationship with God, as, like you were saying, as God being sovereign and as God being God. But he's also not grounded in his accountability with others, right? That's something we've just been talking about. But he did have this really radical encounter with the Spirit where he was dancing and prophesying in the Spirit. And we kind of live in a time that's really relevant actually right now, you know, that people are, like, really hyped up on the Spirit and on the movement of the Spirit, but they're not actually connected with God the Father and God, like, as Lord, you know. We're in a time that I feel like there's a lot more movement of, like, the mysticism and, like, the where the Spirit leads me and, like, whatever. And that's not bad, especially if the Spirit is really leading you. I'm proud of you. Congratulations for following that. But I just wonder, like, if there's also something we can learn about not getting so caught up in a moment of, like, being connected with the Spirit, but instead having a lifestyle of like being submitted under the Father, you know. If we do a contrast of Moses and everything we talked about in the last podcast, it was all about how he was really submitted, and because of that there was a movement of something supernatural in some ways, you know, like he was able to follow something supernatural, where it sort of feels like with Saul, he's like all the time trying to like conjure up his own movement of the Spirit because of what he tasted that one time. So I don't want to, like, I'm not trying to convict anyone, but at the same time I'm like, I wonder how often we live off of like the hype of that one touch of the Holy Spirit we had, that we don't have like the refinement of that we don't have the refinement of what it costs to be submitted, you know, because submission is painful. I can tell you, like, the other day I wanted to drive my friend home, but I'm in a season, as you all know, because we've been talking about this for the last 16 podcasts, I'm in a season of learning what rest is. So I asked my mentor, you think it's okay, my mentor, my disciple or whatever, you think it's okay if I drive my friend home? She said no. I said, well, this is awkward. I already said yes, you know. But I needed to like step back and submit under her authority, not because she's against me driving my friend home, but because there was something to do with submission and something to do with her helping me in part of my process. You know what I'm saying? now I'm giving such a stupid example right now, especially compared to Saul and Samuel and all these things. But my point is like submission is so painful, but to have this mystical moment where like you're like, whoo, I have goosebumps, you know, it's really easy, if that makes sense, you know. And so I don't know. I feel like there's something to be said about Saul not being grounded in the fullness of who God is as Lord. But being really caught up in the hype of it all. Like, the hype of the Spirit that now gives me the hype of leading. Yeah. And I'm going to, like, even with, excuse me, even with this medium. Yeah. She says, like, oh, but Saul, before she realizes it's Saul, she says, oh, but Saul told me that, or said that if anybody goes to mediums, they're going to be put to death. Yeah. And he says, he doesn't say, like, oh, don't worry, like, I'll make sure nobody knows. He says, as long as the Lord lives, you won't be put to death. Like he swears by the Lord so that he can conjure up a dead person. Yeah. Like it, in no way does it align or make sense. It's all like related to the hype of a moment, you know, the hype of a moment of somebody telling him what to do. That, I don't know. It's just, I just find it interesting.
And it's the whole, like, I mean, that's the point of like when he really, when God rejects him fully and is like, no more, I'm not with you anymore, is when he does literally that. He, like, when Samuel tells him that God has told him to go and like kill these people, the Amalekites, I don't know how to say it. Amalekites. There it is.
Yeah. Gotcha. Probably not how they say it, but how I say it.
And he's like, God tells him specifically to kill all the sheep, everything needs to go, you know? And so Saul goes, he kills like mostly everything. And then he keeps some of the sheep and some of the whatever else he wants. And so Samuel goes and is like, so how'd it go? And he's like, yeah, it went great. I did what you told me to do. And then he, like, the sheep is like, disobedience. You know? And Samuel's literally he says like,
what's that?
What's that lamb? I hear a little sheep. I thought I told you to kill everything. And he's like, oh, like I did almost everything.
He was so cute.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I'm just reading it.
Where is it?
It's Samuel 15. Oh. 1 Samuel 15, sorry. And Samuel says to him, like, although you may think little of yourself, are you not the leader of the tribes of Israel? Which is kind of similar to what we were talking about before. It's like, I think Saul really struggled with like insecurity, which is why for me in some ways, like, you can kind of see how Moses, it's interesting that we did these two characters because we didn't think of this at the time. No. But you can kind of see similarities there, you know? Like Moses also was quite insecure. He was very insecure about his voice or about his stutter, about like leading all these people, about doing
where he came from, where he was like who he was seen as.
And so was Saul. Like Saul really was a people pleaser, and he wanted like he didn't think great of himself, and so when other people did, he was like, oh great, I'll do what they tell me to, you know? I'm pretty sure that's the reason why he keeps these sheep and goats, is because like the other people, some of his men are like, we should keep them. Like I think literally that's why he does it. So it's like, but going back to your point, like, and this is I think what I know like this story most for is like the what Samuel says to Saul about like what is more pleasing to God are your burnt offerings and sacrifices or your obedience. You know, and that's all what it comes down to. And it's like kind of what reminded me actually is like exactly what you're saying, you know. What's more important, your like mystic crazy experience or is it being obedient to God in everyday moments, you know, and in what I'm actually telling you to do, because God might be telling you to do, I think you said this in the last episode, you know, like if in case there's ever a time where God tells me to do something like that's like crazy or weird, like I want to do it because it's God telling me to, not because it's crazy or weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of like the like walking around the walls of Jericho, you know? Like I think you were talking about that the other day. Like I don't know, if God tells me to walk around this place 15 times, then let's do it. If I look weird, who cares? But I'm being obedient. You know? And I think that's what it comes down to, is that Saul was always trying to find a way or like always found a way to like do like partial obedience. He did a lot of partial obedience.
It even says that in the same story, like where the sheep is like, meh, you know.
Yeah.
He also built like a whole monument to himself in this.
Yeah.
So he like built himself a Saul statue, and then here comes Samuel, and he's like, "Hey, Samuel,
Yeah.
how are you?" And Samuel's like, "What the heck, man?"
Yeah.
But basically, like, Samuel greets him, and Saul's like, "I did exactly what I was supposed to do." And then the sheep goes.
Yeah.
And then like Samuel confronts him, and Saul says, "I did obey the Lord."
Yeah.
It literally says verse 20, "But I did obey the Lord," Saul insisted. And can you imagine like deceiving yourself so much that you genuinely think you did what is right? Because he says, "I carried out the mission he gave me. I brought back the king Agag, but I destroyed everyone else. Then my troops thought it was best."
Yeah.
But it's crazy because I know if not only my discipler, I really like have a lot of love and trust and respect for my discipler, but we're also talking about Samuel, who's like the prophet of the generation, like the prophet of the time, comes and says, "You have not been obedient." And we're like, "But I was." You're arguing with him.
Oof. Yeah.
Like the state of the heart to argue with the prophet when you know that you're disobedient.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, that's
the thing.
crazy.
He was so blinded that he didn't know he was disobedient. Well, maybe he knew at first, because surely he had to know at some point. But then he was in denial because he was so covered by his own pride, ego, and everything, to the point that he said, "But I did obey." He said that with conviction. He said that with certainty. That's what he did.
Or at least trying to like wiggle his way out of it, you know? Like I think there was also an aspect, like Saul did that a lot, of like, but I kind of did it, you know, like trying to get away from the consequences, you know?
Exactly.
I did that a lot.
Yeah, it's true.
You know,
because even after this, he says, like, "Please forgive me. I'm so sorry. Please come back with me."
Yeah.
And like, forgive me of all my sin. And Samuel's like, "No."
Yeah.
But I think it's because Samuel saw this, like what you were just doing.
Yeah.
Abby's moving her body in a way that makes a lot of sense of what Saul does, like avoiding the responsibility, you know?
And then even after that, like eventually he just begs Samuel to like forgive him. Yeah. And Samuel's eventually like, okay. And then Saul goes and like worships God.
Yeah.
Like he literally goes after that, after being so disobedient, and then goes and is like, but I still want, like he's like takes what he wants from God, and what he doesn't want that God's telling him, he's just like, which is I think why he ended up where he was. You know,
it's not genuine like remorse and feeling sorry. It's like, it's the people pleasing. It's the like, no, please don't be mad at me. Please don't be mad at me. Yeah. Like, I won't do it again because I don't want to like make you be upset with me. But it's not that I'm like convicted of what I've done wrong. So there's no conviction. I think that is so common nowadays as well. Like I see myself so many times and I'm like, no, please don't be mad. That's fine. I'm so sorry. But like that, like, forgive me. I learned this in my DTS that like forgiveness is something that is not earned, and therefore it's given onto somebody else for them to decide your verdict. I'm sorry leaves there no part to like you actually being held accountable, but you just cleaning your hands and saying like, well, I'm sorry, like that's it, my part is done and dusted, I'm going to keep moving forward, you know. But actually, like, we need to learn to go back to the forgive me, because in that we're showing actually that like maybe we still don't even know, but like, show me mercy. I need that mercy. I don't deserve it, but what can I do to be better? You know, it's I'm at your mercy, you know, instead of like, I'm sorry, you know. And I think he wasn't sorry.
It's hard to judge, no? Because it's hard to say like what is genuine and what's not. But I think what you said is really true, that like there's a big difference between remorse and conviction. Yeah. And it's one thing to feel bad, and it's another thing to want to change. And if Saul's struggling a lot with people pleasing, like we talked about, or fear, insecurity, or rebellion, or independence, or whatever other things he struggled with, like his remorse would have been the strongest thing. But I guess I'll put this as a question more than saying it, if that's okay. Host.
Let's go for it.
Like how... Okay, because we looked at Moses, and in the face of his insecurity, he went a certain direction with God. Yeah. And now we're looking at Saul, and in the face of his insecurity, he went a different direction with God. So how do we provoke or walk in a conviction rather than just remorse? Because sometimes, at least for me, I can think that my remorse is conviction. And then I can try to change in my own strength. Very similar to Saul, actually. Like, oh, shoot, you're right, I did that wrong. Finally, you convinced me that I'm wrong. and I'll try so hard to do it better next time, and then I end up keep failing in my own like strengths. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But what's the difference with Moses then?
I think personally the difference is that when Moses kept second guessing himself, but finding his answer in God and letting him have the final word. That's part of the okay, yeah, sure, I have remorse, but my remorse is not my conviction. It's not that because it's a point of being left in that position of self-pity almost, right? Poor me, and but I'm never going to be good enough, whatever, and stuff. But God is saying, I've sent you. When it came to Moses, God was saying, it's not about you, it's because I am, and I'm the one who's sending you, and again, even when they were in the desert, it was the same thing. So it was actually allowing God to have the final say and resting on God's final say, and not remaining on his final say. And I think okay, well, how do you keep going in that? And I think that's what Moses kept doing, is kept going back and checking with God. What Saul did was kept going back and checking with Samuel. He didn't really bring God into the equation. He couldn't hear God, and he went to Samuel and was like, I can't hear God. But instead of cutting Samuel out of his life, or not cutting him out of his life, but instead of also directing some of his energy that way, he just kept going to, and also still staying with what he wanted, because he picked and chose from what he wanted from both.
Yeah.
So I think Moses kept going to God and letting him have the final say, whereas Saul went to whoever he wanted, but he still remained with what he wanted.
Yeah. Kind of God was never his first, it was the last resource.
Yeah.
Or Paul. Saul.
Different guy. Different Saul Paul.
We've gone from Samuel. And
she just brought a whole new name in there.
Yeah, I think it's so true what you were saying. It just for some reason, he just it was a people pleaser. So that became his whole world. Not. Yeah, you cannot feel maybe capable of doing something, or maybe Moses was I don't feel capable of doing this, but he was anointed from before, he was chosen since the beginning. Saul was something that happened after. And I feel he just refuged himself in his fears, and he said there, and he did not allow that to change, or he did not allow for others to help him in you have to change. Not that you're just doing it wrong, but something has to shift, beyond the remorse. Something has to, even if he keeps making mistakes, keep continue doing it. Keep trying for better.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a cheesy answer to your question, but I think, to be honest, it had a lot to do with humility. I think Moses was, we talked about in the last episode, was really humble, you know, and knew, I feel his insecurities came from, kind of like you said as well, came from a bit of a different place. And always was I'm not really worthy to be here. Yeah. Whereas Saul was I just want to do it in my own way, you know, kind of. And I think he didn't walk very much in humility. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And often, like you said, did it in his own strength. Yeah.
But you know, when Saul worships and dances, and has that spiritual moment, that was what you were talking about earlier, that was that wow, that could have been I think where he went mystical. Correct me if I'm wrong, but up until that point, had there been a lot of that? Because I mean, obviously the Holy Spirit was still not super active, but
I don't know.
So could it have also been that we're talking about humility, right? So could it have also been that Saul, when he was with Moses, when God used his staff and he turned it and then he opened and whatever all he did, because he kept being humble, he kept being that was God. But because Saul was experiencing something that was supernatural and it happened to him, he was like, ta-da, it's me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing is that Samuel like tells Saul all of the things that are going to happen before when he anoints him king. So he anoints him and he says, like, when you leave, you're going to see these two men. They're going to tell you about the donkeys that you're looking for. Like he tells him also that he'll be filled with the Spirit. You'll be changed into a different person. After all these signs take place, do what must be done, for God is with you. So in some ways, like, he was told, but at the same time, not told that he was going to dance and prophesy, and probably had never had an experience with the Spirit in that way. I don't think it was common at that time. I don't think
but
so.
maybe he was like one of the only, or if not the only one who was filled by the Spirit.
Yeah.
So that also is something for him to hold on to and be like, I'm filled by the Spirit.
Yeah. Something else that's interesting that I had never thought of until now is the only other person that like you think of when I think of someone dancing in the Spirit, I think of David.
I think of David. It's so true.
Yeah. I don't think of Saul. You know?
Yeah.
I didn't I knew that when you said it, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. But like also another time that another king dances in front of the Lord is very, very different.
I wonder I wonder if Saul, I wonder if Saul was part of God's plan, like original plan. Like, because it even says, as Saul turned away from Samuel and started to leave, God gave him a new heart. So God did like a transformation process. It's not only that Samuel was like bad and Saul was bad, thank you. And God set up this whole plan for the people to see that what they wanted was not actually what they wanted. I wonder if actually from the very beginning, God said, I'm going to choose this guy and I'm going to give him everything I possibly can to make him the person who can lead my people, to be a blessing for my people, to lead them in the direction that I want them to go. And he kept on giving him opportunity. Like it says that he had a new heart. It said that he was transformed. It said that he was like filled with the Spirit on a lot of different occasions, you know? And it was that Saul kept going and remaining with who he wanted to be rather than allowing that transformation to take full place. Does that make sense?
Well, I guess it goes back to God's character of always wanting what's best for us, always looking out for us, always loving us unconditionally and giving us what we don't deserve time and time again. Because again, we always look at Saul and we see him as the villain in the story of David and Saul, you know, we see him as the evil king and David as the good king. But there it says that God kept pursuing him, giving him a good heart, all these different things, anointing him time and time again. So that obviously it shows that God can use anyone and God will use anyone. But also it shows that God is still above all.
I feel like you can also see in some ways like how like it's also similar. Maybe this is a bit of a stretch. I don't know what you guys think. But I can see in some ways how also it's like how we needed Jesus. we needed grace, you know, and we couldn't do it without him, like without that, you know. And that's like God giving everything that the people needed, what Saul needed. He tried to set up everything so it'd be perfect, just like how he set up all these laws until like we tried, you know, we tried to do it that way and it just doesn't work. We needed grace and we needed Jesus. Otherwise it didn't really work. And then came along David, the unknown, like unexpected little guy who's like the runt of the litter, you know, like I don't know. I can also see in some ways like a mirror or like a reflection of that as well. Like, the law and how we eventually, like it doesn't lead to anywhere. It leads to death, you know? Yeah.
Well, crazy.
Anyways, on that note.
I think to God. Run. Lord, I'm really sorry. I'm not a fake sorry.
I think we should definitely come back to Saul at some point, or like do another David. I don't know. Coming back to him because he's got some. There's a lot more about Saul that we could touch on that we haven't, but I think we're kind of out of time here, ladies.
Yeah, we are.
Ladies and ladies.
Lovely ladies.
Lovely ladies. Oh, tying it back in. So that's all for today. This was fun.
It was.
And we'll see. We'll see you guys soon.
See you soon. Bye.